Not all Black American history is dark, but most of it is dark. If you read about the massacres, if you read about the lynchings and all the whole demonic dark soup of injustices that took place within the Black American community, it reads like a horror book. It looks like a horror movie. So if you want to be terrified and you like horror, go read about some tragic Black American history. I promise you won't be disappointed. I'll be back. Welcome back, people. Thank you for coming back. Those who are new, thank you. And let's get into this. I'll be talking about two Black Americans, well, those called Black Americans, married couples. One, Robert Mallard and Amy Mallard. And then the other one, Isaiah Nixon. Isaiah Nixon and Sally Nixon. Sally Nixon refused to tolerate white on Black violence. Let's jump into this. We'll be talking about the Mallards first. She was charged for her husband's murder, but she didn't do it. I'm talking about Amy Mallard. On November the 20th, 1948, a mob of 20 armed white men shot and killed Black American Robert Mallard in front of his family in Lyons, the seat of Toombs County. The killing initially garnered little attention, but due to part to the outspokenness of Mallard's wife, the case soon became national news, and the national NAACP entered the case. Despite no evidence linking her to the crime, Amy Mallard was arrested by local officials for her husband's unaliving. Eventually, two men, William Howe and Roderick Clifton, were indicted for the unaliving, but Howe was acquitted and the charge against Clifton was dropped. After the acquittal, Amy Mallard toured the country on behalf of the NAACP, exposing the terror of mob violence in Georgia. Now, remember during the George Floyd unrest, Holly kept saying mob violence. And remember, I don't know, I did a video. I wasn't doing videos at that time, but when I started doing videos and doing research, I was like, they would know about mob violence in this country. They sure would, but it wasn't at the hands of Black folks. Let's continue. As I said, Ms. Mallard exposed the terror of mob violence in Georgia. Usually it was a group of thousands, literally thousands of white mob. Infuriated white people would go after like literally one or two Black folks or destroy a whole Black community. The Mallard case revealed much about the practices of local and federal law enforcement institutions, civil rights organizations, and the pre-civil rights era. In 1948, 37-year-old Robert Mallard, his wife Amy, and their 2-year-old son John lived in a comfortable home on a farm in sparsely populated Lyons on the banks of the Altamaha River. The Mallards, who were Black, inherited the property from Amy's stepfather, a white landowner. Amy James Mallard, who had a college degree, taught at an elementary school in town and was well respected in the community. Robert Mallard was a successful traveling salesman from a ministerial family. His family and friends called him Duck. In 1940s, Georgia racial animus was rampant and often manifested in violent outbursts. On July 20th, 1946, the last mass lynching in the United States took place on the Moores Ford Bridge at the border of Walton and Oconee counties. 2 black couples were beaten and shot multiple times. The crime was reported in national newspapers and led to mass rallies in New York City and Washington, D.C., but no indictments were ever returned. In 1948, Georgia governor's race only increased racial tensions. The 2 candidates pitted against each other. Herman Talmadge and Melvin E. Thompson knew each other well. A couple of years earlier, Thompson had been lieutenant governor under Georgia Eugene Talmadge, Herman's father. When Eugene Talmadge died on December the 21st, 1946, days before his inauguration in January, the state legislature elected Herman as governor. Thompson challenged the legislators' selection, and on March the 19th, 1947, the Supreme Court of Georgia held that the legislature had no jurisdiction to elect Herman as governor. The unusual situation became known as the 3 governors controversy. The 3rd governor was Ellis Arnold, who was still governor when Eugene Talmadge died. Arnold refused to step down until a new governor was legally in place. In the wake of the Supreme Court's decision, Talmadge and Thompson began to campaign for a special primary election scheduled for September 1948. Race played a central role in Talmadge's campaign. He told his supporters, "When I am your governor, I assure you Georgia's segregation laws will be preserved." More than being segregationist, Herman had concrete ties to the KKK. On November 18, 1946, he had been a featured guest at the birthday party for the Klan's imperial wizard, Samuel Green. Throughout his 1947-48 campaign, Klansmen marched and burned crosses in dozens of Georgia towns to intimidate blacks and discourage voting. They even placed miniature coffins on the doorsteps of black leaders. Okay, do these folks who always say obey the law not understand that politicians and regular citizens were violating the U.S. Constitution? But I guess that the U.S. Constitution is like, the U.S. Constitution, like, what is that when it comes to black folks? It's like, what? What is that? What does that even mean? That's the mentality. Let's go on. Heading into the election, 82% of the white population over 21 years old was registered to vote, but only 18% of the black population over 21 years old was registered. On September the 8th, 1948, Herman was elected as the Democratic Party's nominee for the governor of Georgia. That same day, Isaiah Nixon, a black turpentine worker, was shot and unalived on his porch in Montgomery County. That's who I'll be talking about after this, which borders Toombs County, for voting in the election despite warnings not to. After Talmadge's election, statewide NAACP membership plummeted from 11,000 to 3,000. Meanwhile, with the endorsement of the governor-elect, Green boosted state Klan membership to an estimated 100,000 members. In Toombs County, where the Mallards resided, undercover observers for the anti-Nazi League reported that the Klan had 2 or 3 discussions concerning the need for Klan activity. Cliff Victor of the KKK reported that a demonstration was held in Vidalia in Toombs County on October 28, 1948. According to Victor, 300 Klansmen arrived from all parts of Georgia and were met at the city limits by Toombs County Sheriff R.E. Gray, the police chief and assistant chief who escorted the parade into town. Victor further stated that all 3 of the aforementioned officials, including Sheriff Gray as well as all the officials from Vidalia except the mayor, were members of the KKK. You think it ain't still like that today? Check out these politicians up there and check out what they vote for and what they vote against and what they vote for. Check out their history. Do some deep diving on some of these politicians, the ones that get up there speaking reckless, but then turn around. They speak loud, racist, and reckless, but then turn around and say there's no racism. On the night of November 20th, 1948, Robert and Amy Mallard, their son John, and two of Amy Mallard's young cousin, Angelina Carter and William Tim Carter, were returning home from a gathering at the Oak Grove Elementary School in Lyons, where Amy Mallard was a teacher. Robert Mallard, driving his shiny new Fraser automobile, turned onto a small path leading to their home near the Providence Baptist Church, which had a white congregation. There they encountered several automobiles. A mob of men standing outside the vehicles and wearing white robes yelled, "Hands up!" And Amy Mallard recognized one of the men as her neighbor. Suddenly, the mob opened fire at the Mallard's car. Amy Mallard slumped to the floor of the car for protection. One bullet pierced the windshield and struck the chest of Robert Mallard, killing him. Once the mob dispersed, Amy Mallard got out of the car and saw her husband on the ground with blood streaming from his mouth. She ran to the home of a nearby farmer, Frank Brinson, who notified Sheriff Gray of the slaying. When Gray arrived at the scene, rather than attempt to locate the suspects, he searched Amy Mallard, emptied her pocketbook of all its contents, and read her personal letters. Several theories emerged to explain the unaliving. One theory suggested political intimidation. Amy Mallard later testified during grand jury proceedings that her family had been warned not to vote in the November gubernatorial election that featured segregationist candidate Herman Talmadge. Another theory proposed that a recent incident outside Providence Church was motivation for the killing. Amy Mallard, driving the Fraser, honked the car horn in an attempt to have one of the white churchgoers move a car obstructing traffic, an unacceptable act in the minds of some locals. Who is this niggers honking this horn, driving this new lovely car? Can you imagine the conversations that took place? You see why they want to bury this history? You're never going to bury it. The more you try to bury it and hide it and deny it, the worse it's going to get. Let's go on. The most prominent theory, though, was that Mallard was killed because white neighbors resented his prosperity, embodied in his new car. Didn't you know black folks can look like they was more prosperous than these people who call themselves superior? Okay, let's go on. After the killing, Amy Mallard, her son, and her two cousins immediately fled to Savannah. News of the murder did not leave Lyons quickly. Although the Toombs County Sheriff's Office was immediately notified about the killing, it failed to investigate or comment publicly on the case for 4 days. Finally, on November the 24th, Sheriff Gray stated that witnesses told him that Mallard was unalived by a group of white men wearing some white stuff. The next day, Gray was completely dismissive of Mallard's story, stating that earlier reports of the shooting were in error and that Robert Mallard was a bad Negro. Governor Talmadge ordered the GBI to launch an investigation. On November 27, Mallard's funeral was held in Savannah. Amy Mallard's brother, J.C. James, arrived at the funeral in the Mallard's Fraser automobile, which had a single bullet hole visible in the windshield. At the conclusion of the funeral, agents from the GBI arrived, arrested Mallard, and charged her with her husband's murder. You see how? Isn't that is what you call adding insult to injury? This woman saw her husband gunned down for no reason because he's black. He was black and successful, and then she gets arrested for it. You can't make this stuff up. You see why I'm gonna keep saying. You see why they want to bury this stuff? But see, that's why people like me and other people around this country and this world keep talking about it. You're not gonna stop me from talking about it, but you gonna be stopped for lying and trying to bury the truth. Watch. Let's go on. The agents then drove her from Savannah to Lyons, where she was held for 9 hours and finally released without bond. Her neighbor Frank Brinson and her 2 cousins were also arrested before boarding a bus back to Savannah. Mallard became scared and hid out overnight in the woods. I don't blame her. I don't blame her. Unfairness. That's why they have these the courts locked up. They put people in the courts to reside over people who look like me and to help people who look like them out of situations where they would normally go to jail. Let's go on. Georgia officials failed to explain Amy Mallard's arrest. On November 28th, upon her release, GBI Lieutenant W.E. McDuffie stated that he thought the KKK had been wrongfully accused in this case. Meanwhile, the Klan released a statement signed by Sheriff Gray exculpating the Klan from Mallard killing. While little evidence suggests the unaliving was an official Klan killing, there were hints that the perpetrator and Sheriff Gray had ties to the organization. 3 forces spearheaded the NAACP involvement in the case: the National Office, A.T. Walden, and Joseph Goldwasser. The National Office, with Special Counsel Thurgood Marshall at the forefront, assumed immediate control of the Mallard's case and insisted that the federal government intervene. The case, however, did not immediately lend itself to prosecution under federal statutes that required an obvious deprivation of a federal right or clear state action. All legal matters in the case were delegated from the National Office to Black Georgia attorney A.T. Walden, who perhaps strategically limited his role in the case. Neither Walden nor the National Office thoroughly investigated the killing. Joseph Goldwasser, a Jewish businessman from Cleveland, Ohio, and a member of the Cleveland NAACP branch, decided to launch his own investigation into the Mallard killing. He arrived in Georgia on November 30th, 1948, acting as an individual and representing no one. Disguising himself as a local farmer, he met with William Howe and Roderick Clifton, who both stated that they were part of the mob that unalived Mallard. Goldwasser presented his findings to Georgia Talmadge and threatened to turn over his information to the FBI if Talmadge did not act. On December 3rd, 1948, after Goldwasser made his report to Governor Talmadge, the governor pledged that he would protect Amy Mallard if she returned to Toombs County to swear out warrants. The next day, 5 white men, Roderick Clifton, William Howe, James Spivey, Herschel Sykes, and Barney Sykes, surrendered and were held under suspicion in the case. After the men surrendered, a series of fires wiped out the Lyons black business area. Oh, have you heard of that? Few questioned that the fires were meant to intimidate black members in the community. Amid this tension, on December 8th, Mallard returned to Lyons to swear out a warrant against William Howe. On December 10th, a special grand jury session was held at the Toombs County Superior Court, which was crowded to capacity. After hearing an account of the slaying from Mallard, the grand jury indicted Howe and Clifton. Ralph McGill, editor of the Atlanta Constitution, also testified at the hearing regarding the reluctance of the governor authorities to bring the murderers to justice. The 3 other men who were held in connection with the murder were never charged. On January 11, 1949, the trial of Howe was set to begin. Clifton had obtained a severance of trial. Mallard testified that her husband and her family turned off on a side road leading to their home and were stopped by a gang of about 20 men wearing white stuff and all carrying pistols. She testified that she recognized Howe among the members of the mob and also recognized Clifton's automobile. During her testimony, Mallard became hysterical and fell from the witness chair to the floor. Kneeling with her hands in the air, she exclaimed, "It was so horrible. Why did they kill him? He was so good to us. I'm so sick." Howe's attorneys presented his defense, though alibi, good character testimony, and implied impeachment of Mallard. Howell testified that he spent the night with friends and his friends corroborated his story. The defense sought to imply that Amy Mallard had a pistol that night. Defense lawyers further claimed that outside influences were trying to control the verdict. Howell's defense attorney, Thomas Ross Sharp, employed a surprising legal maneuver during the trial when he called two jurors to serve as character witnesses in the case. The jurors testified that they would not believe, even under oath, the chief prosecution witness, Amy Mallard. The jurors also claimed that Amy Mallard had a bad reputation. The state prosecutors did not object to jury testimony, and the procedure was permissible at the end of Howell's trial in 1949. Oh my God, I'm just trying not to be irritated, but it's ridiculous. Ooh. After only 25 minutes of deliberation, the jury acquitted Howell, and the courthouse crowd cheered in jubilation. The judge granted the county attorney's motion to dismiss the indictment against Clifton, since the evidence against Clifton was weaker than that against Howell. After the trial, defense attorney Sharp said of Goldweiser that roaring lion from Judah is a disgrace to the Jewish race. He wouldn't even make catfish bait in the Out-Mahal River. Oh, God. That was a threat. Those who were following the proceedings, including the black press, NAACP officials, and Goldweiser, concluded that the trial was a farce. Thurgood Marshall proclaimed that the arrest, indictment, and trial was perfunctory motions for the sole purpose of averting federal action. Mallard's attorney, Aaron Kravitz, stated publicly that he was satisfied of the results of the over-publicized case. In 1949, the NAACP announced that Amy Mallard would make a tour under its auspices with her 18-year-old daughter, Doris Byron, and her 2-year-old son, John, to promote the enactment of civil rights legislation, simulate membership, and raise funds. Goldweiser traveled with Mallard during the tour in some of the larger cities. The tour began successfully. In Baltimore, Maryland, Mallard told the crowd of 2,800, "There's no law in Georgia, just dirty men." That trial wasn't a trial. All white jury, all white lawyers, all white everything, she stated. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life fighting for democracy in America." In Washington, D.C., 2,500 men and women jammed into a church to hear her speak. Goldweiser stated that all told, the tour enlightened many thousands of people. After touring the East Coast, the NAACP canceled the tour, citing a lack of funds. On July the 4th, 1949, units of the KKK allegedly burned down the Mallard home in Lyons. Sheriff Gray was reported as saying, "It was just an accident. That woman hasn't been back here to look after her property since she left." Indeed, Mallard and her son left Lyons for good and relocated to Buffalo, New York. Little was known about the Mallards after this period. You see why we gonna keep talking about it? Ain't nobody gonna stop me from talking about it. I promise you that. Okay, now this one. Her husband was killed for his vote. She refused to tolerate white-on-black violence. See, that's why they start coming out with the black-on-black violence, black-on-black crime, because they was trying to come in and overshadow white-on-black violence. So black folks stop playing into the bull crap and stop saying black-on-black crime, because there's no such thing. Black-on-black crime is a derivative of white-on-black crime. Sally Nixon saw it all. She had been at home that morning when Isaiah left to vote, and she was on the veranda that evening as two white men parked their black two-door sedan in her yard. From the car, Jim and Johnny Johnson asked Sally to have Isaiah come out to talk to them. Sally obliged and called her husband, who exited their home to approach the brothers. Sally walked back onto the veranda as the two leapt out of the car, each holding a loaded gun. The brothers inquired how Isaiah voted that morning. Sally listened as Isaiah replied, "Guess I voted for Mr. Thompson." She heard the Johnsons demand that her husband get into their car, but Nixon took a step back towards the farmhouse. Jim then shot Isaiah multiple times. At the sound of the first gunshot, Sally screamed, "Fall, Isaiah, fall!" A command to escape the line of fire. Sally's warning was too late. Isaiah had already been shot 3 times, maybe 4, and was gravely injured. Jim and Johnny then returned to their car and drove away. Dover Carter, a friend of Nixon, visited Nixon in the hospital the next day, whereupon Nixon told him that he was shot because he had voted. The Pittsburgh Courier affirmed this in a page 1 article, writing, "Isaiah Nixon was killed because he voted." Sally was there too when Jim and Johnny Johnson went to trial for Nixon's murder. Sally was in court to testify as to what she saw and to confirm the identity of the Johnson's brothers as her husband's killers. The act of testifying was an act of courage in and of itself. For a black woman to blame a white man for murder could have caused a lethal act of retribution. Furthermore, Sally Nixon had to tell her account of her husband's death, knowing that the 2 white men who killed her husband will probably go unpunished. Consequently, her testimony was a momentous event. During the trial, Jim admitted to killing Nixon, but claimed it was in self-defense, since Nixon drew a knife. Unbelievable. He drew a knife, okay. Sally contradicted Jim's statement, maintaining that Nixon did not wield a knife. After a trial that lasted only 2 hours, a jury acquitted Jim and the prosecutor dropped charges against Johnny. Although the Johnson brothers were freed later that day, Miss Nixon's testimony was proof that she would not tolerate white on black violence any longer. 16 days later, Sally and Daisy Davis, Isaiah's mother, packed up their belongings and headed to Jacksonville, Florida. All 8 members of the Nixon family moved in with Daisy's brother, John D. Collins. In a letter to the Pittsburgh Courier, Ms. Nixon wrote, "The children were very glad to leave Georgia. They were so afraid up there until they were pitiful." Some articles report that Sally moved out of fear, but her daughters recall that Sally left for her children's well-being. Furthermore, Miss Nixon refused to live in a state that had blatantly disregarded the evidence that had pointed to the Johnson brothers' guilt in order to maintain white supremacy. Once settled in their new home, Sally immediately enrolled her children in school. She refused to let anything get in the way of her children's education and install a sense of normalcy in their turbulent lives through education. The fact that Miss Nixon enrolled her children in school was remarkable. The South at the time was the most illiterate part of the United States. Sally was active in their schooling and served as a member of the PTA. Because of Sally's influence, 5 of the 6 Nixon children graduated from college and 4 continued on to obtain advanced degrees in their fields. Acceptance in college was a feat for black students in the Jim Crow era, and black schools were underfunded and significantly inferior to white schools. You see why, what's that thing? Affirmative action came about in DEI. Oh, y'all want to forget why that came about, right? But you want to say that these programs cause division, but you don't want to talk about the root of the problem. That's just like going to the doctor saying, "Hey doc, I need a script. I need some pain pills and some antibiotics." The doctor say, "For what?" "I don't know. I just want them." "Okay, here's the script. See you later." Y'all gonna keep hiding stuff until this whole country implode. Both Sally and Daisy would not accept Nixon's death as an excuse for their family to break down. Instead, they did the best they could to ensure their future. to ensure the future success of their children and family. Their resilience in the face of tragedy gave way to their offspring's successes. In 1959, after 3 white men successfully charged and sentenced to jail for assaulting 3 black women, John McCrae, editor of South Carolina Lighthouse and Informer, wrote an article. Are we now witnessing the arrival of black women? Are they at long last gaining the emancipation they needed? All these men were indicted because of the black women who testified against them. Emancipation for black women did not begin in 1959. However, these positive court outcomes were the result of hundreds of black women standing up for themselves and for their families' rights to be treated as equals to white Americans. Oh, God, I wish they didn't say that. The long tradition of black women's testimony stretched back to slavery in the United States and only became successful in the mid-20th century. Sally Nixon was one of the women who testified for justice for her husband, but also to obtain a better future for her children. Her courageous acts followed in the legacy of black women refusing to believe that they were inferior while living in a society that dictated them as such. These women are now revered. Listen, y'all better recognize how much authority and power black women have. You better recognize it. All right, folks. There's nothing I can really say about these 2 separate stories that basically intertwined. There's nothing I can say. It's right there, and that's one reason why they want to bury what they have done to our people. There was white on black crime, and black on black crime supposedly came. It was never a black on black thing. They came out with that to stigmatize you, and you fell right into it. Like I said, Hispanics kill one another, Asians kill one another, Russians kill one another. What's happening over there in other part of the world? Ukraine and Russia. They look alike, but you don't hear nothing about no white on white crime. You don't hear when Hispanics kill one another, these cartel members. You don't hear where Asians kill one another, these Asian gangs. You don't hear it. The only time you hear about it is when black people. Oh my God! And then what makes it worse is when you hear black people talk about it. I'll be like, why don't you just? When I hear a black person talk about black on black crime, I'll be like, okay, why don't you just take your black card, get a shredder, and just put it in the shred machine, then take the shredded pieces out and burn it. And then take the ashes and dig a hole somewhere, desert, and forget where you buried it. And then destroy the shovel you used to dig up the hole. Alright, folks, I'm done. Thank you for your time and attention. Those who understood the message and appreciate it, I appreciate you. Those who want to continue to live in this fantasy world that's about to soon blow up, hey, I tried to tell you. Deuces, I'm out.